Visualize passing away due to an illness only to be brought before God. And when you're blessed with an almighty tool that lets you live out your dreams as a farmer, you start to attract dangerous monsters that seek out your power. The anime follows our MC, Hiraka Machio, a 39-year-old man who had fallen ill and passed away due to his terminal illness, only to be brought before God. God says they're willing to give Hiraku a second chance at life. And when God asks if there is anything Hiraku wants in particular, Hiraku says he wants to try farming in his new life. Intrigued by the request, God contacts the god of agriculture to help bless Hiraku's new body. And to top things off, Hiraku is granted the almighty farming tool to make his life easier. Just like that, God sends Hiraku into his new body, waking up in a mysterious forest only to jump with joy seeing as he feels great in his new body. With his dreams of a farmer flashing through his mind, Hiraku scans the surrounding forest, only to question what he should do. Remembering the almighty farming tool he was given, Hiraku magically conjures a hoe only to begin breaking apart the soil beneath him, surprised to see the dirt is quite soft and fluffy. Realizing that he needs to find food and water to survive, Hiraku tries listening for any water stream nearby, but sadly only the rustling of leaves can be heard. When Hiraku begins trekking through the forest, he fails to find any edible plants, suddenly turning as he hears something scurry by him. Seeing as dangerous animals may reside in the forest, Hiraku speeds up his search only to bump into a massive tree where he marks as his home base. Even after searching for a while, Hiraku fails to find any water nearby, choosing to rely on some dowsing rods to help locate any underground water sources. Funnily, the dowsing rods don't work, leading Hiraku to conjure a shovel with his almighty farming tool, realizing that the almighty tool can morph into any basic farming equipment he desires. Interestingly, Hiraku sees that he can dig forever without getting tired, choosing to burrow deep underground until he strikes gold in the form of a water source. Back on the surface, Hiraku says he doesn't feel hungry at all, grateful for whatever blessings God gave him. Seeing as it's still too dangerous to venture into the forest, Hiraku begins clearing up the area around his base with his mighty tool, only to run into a tree that is in his way. Calling for an axe, Hiraku charges up a swing to chip away at the tree, but monstrously a single swing takes down the entire tree. Hiraku is amazed by the power of the almighty farming tool, swiftly conjuring a hatchet to help process the tree, and magically it slices and slides through the tree trunk like butter. Working throughout the day, Hiraku gathers his lumber into a pile, reasoning that he should start building a home, but fears he doesn't have any nails or adhesive to bind the wood together. With the sun beginning to set, Hiraku tries calling for some matches to start a fire, but sadly nothing happens. Racking his brain for an alternative solution, Hiraku conjures a magnifying glass, but sadly the sun has set before he can put it to use. Choosing to carve a hole in the massive tree, Hiraku spends his time carving some utensils with a chisel, only to be mesmerized by the two moons in the night sky. Having stayed up all night to experiment with different wood carvings, Hiraku rehydrates the next day using his underground water source, only to finally start a fire using his magnifying glass. Spending several hours clearing out more of the surrounding scenery, Hiraku says he doesn't feel fatigued whatsoever whilst using the almighty farming tool, but fearing that his exhaustion may catch up to him, Hiraku begins making plans to hunt for something. Right on cue, a ravenous-looking bunny rushes towards Hiraku, and before he knows it, he slays the creature, choosing to roast it over his fire for his first meal in this new world. Although the roasted bunny wasn't the tastiest, Hiraku continues setting up his home base by installing a wooden toilet with a decent filtration system, and with some added walls and a roof over the toilet. Hiraku can finally relieve himself in peace. Getting back to work, Hiraku begins tilling the soil in preparation for his farm. And as he works throughout the day to create 3 soil patches, he realizes that he doesn't have any seeds to grow. A little annoyed, Hiraku stuffs himself with any leftover rabbit only to head to bed. But when he awakens the next day, he is surprised to see several sprouts growing in his soil patches. Wondering if the almighty farming tool helped with this miracle, Hiraka gets fired up to nurture his new plants as he begins creating a ditch and adding some fencing to prevent wild rabbits from invading his patches. Moving forward a few days, Hiraku is seen expanding his farm and finishing up his fencing around his home, only to wonder if the rabbits he's been slaying have been trying to hunt him. Regardless, Hiraku uses his almighty tool to help water his plants, noting how they grow faster with the almighty tool's touch. In the coming days, Hiraku finally finishes creating his first small hut. Hiraku is proud that the entire structure was made out of wood, spending his nights in the hut and away from the monsters that lurk in the forest, only to continue nurturing his farm during the day. Interestingly enough, Hiraku runs into a pair of dogs on a particular day, and seeing as they don't seem to be hostile, Hiraku invites them into his home. Having slain a giant boar, Hiraku spares some of the meat he harvested, only to notice one of the dogs is currently pregnant, suspecting that the canines are looking for a safe place to give birth. Hiraku says he always wanted a pet dog, but out of nowhere the female dog begins to writhe in pain, signaling to Hiraku that she is about to give birth. Quickly taking the dogs to his hut, Hiraku reasons he should fetch the dog some water, and seeing as the female dog is in pain, Hiraku places a fire outside the hut for the dogs, all whilst he spends his night back in the hole in the tree. Hiraku says it's a relief that the giant boar he slayed didn't find the dogs first, and as Hiraku knocks out for the night, he awakens the next day to a pleasant surprise, with the female dog managing to give birth to 4 smaller pups. Hiraku celebrates a successful delivery by feeding the dogs some fatty meat, and as some more time passes, the dogs eventually become fond of living with Hiraku. Hiraku chose to create a separate, bigger home for himself, whilst the dogs were given a small hut. Plus, it seems some of Hiraku's plants are finally sprouting, with his first harvest containing tomatoes. Over time, the dogs would help hunt monsters and guard Hiraku's farm, leading Hiraku to begin naming them, starting with Kuro for the father dog and Yuki for the mother, whilst the children were called Kuro 1, Kuro 2, Kuro 3, and Kuro 4. With even the dogs enjoying the vegetables he grows, Hiraku says he needs to build a storage room and build more furniture and tools to make his life easier, excited to see what is to come in the future. At night, we see a hooded lady asking for a way to cross the nearby mountain, but a townsfolk says it is too dangerous to cross the mountain since she'll need to pass through the forest of death. Cutting over to God, we see him checking in on how Hiraku is doing, only to feel bad seeing as Hiraku was spawned into the forest of death with nothing to go on. Luckily, Hiraku is doing pretty well, having managed to grow potato, onions, tomatoes, and cabbages with the help of his almighty tool, and strangely whatever plant Hiraku was thinking about when he was tilling the soil was ultimately the plant that began magically growing after using the almighty farming tool. Hiraku suspects that most plants bear vegetables after 2 weeks, and upon inspecting the potatoes, Hiraku realizes that the potatoes grown near the root are actually poisonous, information he commits to heart. Hiraku also shows off the statues he carved of the agriculture and creator god as a way to thank them for his new life. And as Hiraku sits down for a stew he created with his homegrown vegetables and the meat he hunted and drained, Hiraku says he could definitely use some seasoning to spice up his meals. Hiraku reasons he should start planting some fruit plants as well, placing them outside his fence, seeing as they'll take a while to grow, and in the meantime Hiraku plays fetch with the dogs. Hiraku is glad to have others to spend time with, surprised to see the dogs have horns, and interestingly enough Hiraku can use them to help navigate through the forest. With the help of Kuro's keen senses, Hiraku stumbles onto a river that could act as a reliable water source. And with Hiraku wanting to dig a path from the river all the way back to his home, he first sets up a toilet near the river in case of emergencies. Having transformed his almighty tool into a wheelbarrow, Hiraku says he can transport things around more faster, and back at home base he has begun expansion of his fields. Hiraku begins to add oilseed plants to help with the production of oil, wheat to yield flour, and sugarcane for sugar. Off to the side, Hiraku sees that his soybean plants have grown, but sadly he has no salt to enjoy them as edamame. And before he knows it, some more time has passed and the surroundings have gotten more cold. Hiraku says he can see snow forming on the nearby mountains, fearing what winter has installed for him. And having failed to use the rabbit's fur as additional layers of clothing, Hiraka chooses to stock up for the winter. Out of nowhere, Kuro introduced Hiraku to a fluffy-looking spider, a creature that is able to produce silk and weave them into clothing for Hiraku. Hiraka gladly allows the spider to stay in his giant tree, all whilst feeding it some potatoes in exchange for some warm clothing. Surprisingly, the spider also decks out Hiraka's home with some sheets for his bed, pillows, and curtains, ultimately bestowing the name of Zabuton. As snow falls on Hiraku's home, he chooses to lock himself away in his house where his fire pit keeps him warm and his harvested vegetables keep him fed, but Hiraku begins to feel lonely, wondering when he'll get to speak with people again. With time flying by, winter eventually passes and Hiraku returns to his daily routine. But interestingly, Kuro and Yuki's pups have all grown up and began venturing into the nearby forest. Not even a day later, the pups return with partners of their own. And as for Zabuton, it seems she had given birth to children of her own. More motivated than ever to expand his farm, to feed his expanding family. But suddenly Hiraku's companions alert Hiraku to something dangerous nearby, prompting Hiraku to rush and check it out. Deep in the forest, Hiraku runs into a shy-looking girl who has been cornered by his companions. But as the girl asks for help, Hiraku's companions prepare to attack her. Hiraku calls for everyone to stand down, preparing to hand the girl some clothing to cover up, but suddenly she leaps onto Hiraku, swiftly biting his neck. Having tasted his blood, the girl begins to transform and grow before Hiraku's eyes. But before Hiraku can ask who she is, Hiraku's dogs attack her, forcing her to revert back into her smaller form. Hiraku learns that the girl had to suck his blood to replenish her strength. And funnily enough, when she tried devouring one of Hiraku's companions prior, she was brutally beaten by them. Feeling bad for the poor girl, Hiraku allows her to refuel and suck his blood, surprisingly feeling fine due to his healthy body blessing from the gods. Taking the girl back to his base, Hiraku sees that she is drawn to the tomato he has grown, a plant she isn't familiar with. As the girl munches on a juicy tomato, he gladly shows her around his farm, both spending the day chatting and having fun, only to retreat into Hiraku's home for the night. Hiraku hears that the girl's name is Rururushi the vampire, a being capable of wielding magic and also researches medicinal plants. Ru says some nobles were after her research, so they chased her into the forest. But luckily, Ru has been saved and plans to study the plants Hiraku has grown before she leaves. Hiraku hears that the forest he lives in is quite dangerous, and that his almighty farming tool is magic Ru has never seen before. But seeing as it's the perfect chance, Hiraku begs Ru to stay with him forever as he doesn't want to be lonely. Flustered by the proposal, Ru cries that she's a vampire, but Hiraku could care less as he wants someone to spend the rest of his life with. Funnily enough, Hiraku gets embarrassed having realized he has just confessed his love to Ru, but Ru doesn't mind agreeing to live forever with Hiraku. The next morning, Hiraku is back on his farming duties, warmly greeting Ru, who has just awoken. Ru says she is in her smaller form to prevent Hiraku from embracing her whilst he's all dirty, but Hiraku says Ru is their first official villager, uttering that he can help Ru grow some medicinal herbs if she likes. Later that night, we see another mysterious girl asking for directions through the forest of death, strangely uttering that she'll be fine with traveling through the forest. Within a few days of living with Ru, Hiraku is grateful that Ru installed some light magic in their bathroom, along with showing Hiraku where to mine some salt. Now with the sleepy vampire awake, they head to check on their orange and peach trees, all while sipping on some tea Ru had brewed. Hiraku mentions how he is craving some black tea, but out of nowhere Hiraku hears that there is another intruder nearby, rushing into the forest only to see a winged girl crying out for help. As Hiraku defuses the situation, he becomes speechless seeing the girl heal her wounds with a wave of her finger. And surprisingly, she seems to have been looking for Ru. Heading home, the girl introduces herself as Tia, the Angel, a race of warriors that are quite strong. Tia is surprised to hear that Hiraku is Ru's husband, but Tia regretfully informs Hiraku that there had been a bounty placed on Ru since she had wreaked havoc in a nearby town. Ru says she was captured by a noble and forced to create medicine for them, so she rebelled and escaped. But before Tia can scold Rue for causing so much trouble, Rue admits that she was wrong to have destroyed the noble's home. Tia is surprised Rue has matured a decent amount, even offering to show Tia around their base, only for Rue to present their growing crops along with their soon-to-bloom fruits. When Rue introduces Zabuton, Tia collapses out of shock, having a fear for spiders. But to cheer her up, Rue invites Tia to harvest some crops with them. With Hiraku taking the lead, he shows Tia how to harvest some cabbages, and seeing as Tia is intrigued by the vegetable, Hiraku washes and seasons some leaf for Tia to try. Although skeptical, Tia is pleasantly surprised to see the cabbage taste quite fresh, inspiring our trio to work throughout the rest of the day. Satisfied by their harvest, the girls clean themselves with magic, only for our trio to head inside where Tia indulges in some succulent strawberries. Seeing as Tia enjoyed her time farming with them, Rue declares that Tia will be living with them moving forward in time, where Tia has become part of the village. With Tia present, we see the girls creating golems to help move around heavy logs, and when Tia asks if they could add more strawberry plants to their farm, Hiraku says the strawberries will be hard to manage, plus he fears there will be too much food for them to eat alone. Right on cue, Hiraku takes note of the new puppies that have been birthed from Kuro and Yuki's children, and seeing as they'll need to further expand the hut for their new puppies, Hiraku gets to work opening up another section in the forest for the pups to roam around, erecting a bigger home for the dogs to stay. Hiraku admits that he is having trouble finding names for the new pups, and when Hiraku checks on Zabuton, we see some of her children leaving the village to explore the greater world. Hiraku is glad to see some of Zabuton's children have remained behind, and with Tia asking for permission to leave for a few days, she magically returns with a group of elves who introduce themselves as Ria, Leaf, Lickit, Lisa, Lily, Lita, and Lise. When the elves try asking if they can live with Hiraku, Hiraku wonders if he should refuse, but Tia reveals that the elves originally lived up north, but a war amongst humans wiped out their village. The elves that survived now roam the land with no place they can call home, and with both Tia and Rue begging Hiraku to accept the elves as their family, Hiraku eventually gives in. When Rue shows off Zabuton and the dogs that also live on the farm, the elves faint as they also fear such scary creatures. But seeing as the elves need a home, the gang begin preparations. Starting off by clearing some land and building a toilet for the elves, the girls are able to coordinate and work together to construct a massive wooden home in the span of 10 days, a feat Hiraku would have never been able to accomplish alone. Heading inside, the girls chat in the living room, while Hiraku admires the building to house 2 storage rooms on opposite ends of the house and a central living area, with 2 floors completely lit with light magic. Exploring the second floor, Hiraku sees that the entire floor is filled with rooms for the girls, wondering if the elves will like it here. Within a few days, Hiraku is glad to see the elves getting used to living on a farm. But when speaking with Ria, Hiraku is surprised that elves aren't beings that love spending time in nature and forage to survive. Ria says people shouldn't underestimate the harsh conditions of nature. And even more surprisingly, Ria says she wants to start mining and doing some blacksmithing as repayment to Hiraku for giving them a place to live. Not even a day later, we see the elven girls constructing a furnace, and as Ria beats away at some hot metal, she presents to Hiraku a metal pot. Hiraku is amazed at the elves' knowledge, surprised that Ria is around 400 years old whilst their youngest is around 300 years old, but the girls seem to be interested in reproducing now that they've found a place to settle down. That evening, whilst Hiraku and some of the girls are doing their daily harvest, we see Ria ask permission to use some of the flour they had created from the wheat they grew, hinting that they have something special in mind they want to create. Getting to work, we see the elves sifting and baking some dough, only to show off some freshly baked bread they created with the help of some natural yeast. But as the gang stuff their faces with the bread, Hiraku asks if the land they're on belongs to anyone. Thinking for a bit, Rue says technically the demon lord owns the land, a revelation that haunts Hiraku. Rue reassures Hiraku that since he refurbished and refined the land himself, he will have full ownership of the land. And as we cut to later that night, we see Tia chatting with Ria and Rue. Tia says it's amazing that Hiraku was able to tame so many inferno wolves and even a demon spider. As the girls praise Hiraku for making it so far with so little knowledge, we see Hiraku spending his night carving some more wooden utensils, only to wonder if he could ask Ria and the elves to help with building the waterway between his village and the lake he found prior. With the next day arriving, we see Hiraku run into Zabuton, only to see that she has captured a bee. Zabuton says the bee will be of good use to Hiraku, prompting Hiraku to set up a little house for the bee to set up their nest. After 10 days, Hiraku sees that the queen bee has already compiled together its nest, and seeing as worker bees have already populated the nest, Hiraku gets excited to harvest some honey. When Tia arrives to ask something of Hiraku, she suddenly flees, seeing bees have swarmed Hiraku. But as we cut to later that day, we see Hiraku showing Ria the reservoir he built. Ria hears that Hiraku still needs to draw the water into the reservoir from the nearby lake, and seeing as they can't use stone nor wood to create the waterway, the duo settle for some compact dirt as their material of choice. As the elves help with production, the gang end up constructing a water gate atop the waterfall along with a waterway that leads back to the reservoir, and within a few minutes the gang are able to fill their reservoir with water. Interestingly, Hiraku sees that several fishes have been caught in his water gate, even running into a gigantic fish that he brings home to roast. Tia and Rue are shocked to see Hiraku nonchalantly grilling such a horrific-looking fish, and with Hiraku confirming that the fish is edible and tastes like salmon, he beckons Tia and Rue to give the fish a go. Instantly, the fish is a hit amongst the village, but most of their caught fish was ultimately soaked in salt and left to dry in the storage room. When Hiraku sees that his rice plants are growing fine, he declares that they'll be creating a rice paddy, immediately getting to work as he clears up some space for their new paddy. Unleashing some water into the paddy, Hiraku instructs the girls to get their feet wet as they'll be planting some seedlings alongside him. Working in tandem, they manage to populate the area, and in the blink of an eye, the seedlings sprout into rice plants. With the girls helping to reap the crops, Hiraku sets them out to dry all day, only to gather them in the girls' dorm that evening. Now moving on to the processing stages, Hiraku begins extracting the rice from the crops, gleefully celebrating as he scoops up a handful of rice. Outside, Hiraku begins cooking the rice, a sight that confuses the girls. After a few minutes, Hiraku unveils the hot, steamy rice, shaping them into rice balls only to hand them out. With each bite, the girls are struck by the fluffy rice, only to be surprised by the salty fish filling Hiraku added, satisfying Hiraku as he's happy to see the girls enjoying his cooking. As days pass, we see Hiraku and the elves tending to their rice paddy, and after each session, the elves clean themselves off with magic. Jealous, Hiraku gets started by mapping out a plan to construct a bath, and seeing as they'll need a furnace and changing room, he employs the help of the elves. Starting off with a furnace, Hiraku eventually moves on to creating a tub big enough to fit multiple people. Couple this with some stools and buckets for the washing area. Hiraku does fear that they'll be dumping dirty water back into the river, but Tia says they can simply use slimes to help purify the water waste, as slimes eat any and everything. With Tia gathering some slimes for the village, Hiraku puts them to work by having them help filter out any dirty water they have in the village. And before Hiraku can warm up the bath with some firewood, he notices mushrooms growing from the wood he gathered. Hiraku remembers Rue pointing out how hard it is to distinguish between poisonous and safe mushrooms, whilst Ria and her elves love cooking and eating every mushroom they find. As for Tia, she had offered to eradicate every mushroom in their vicinity. Before Hiraku can experiment with the mushrooms he has found, he chooses to explain to the girls how to properly take a bath, but the girls ask that Hiraku demonstrate it instead. Seeing no other way, Hiraku starts by unclothing himself only to rinse and clean off his body, swiftly heading into the bath, all whilst the girls watch. Hiraku is immediately swept away by the luscious warm water, glad to have been given a second chance at life, but suddenly the girls follow Hiraku's instructions and begin washing themselves off. In mere moments, the bath becomes populated with the girls, but Hiraku can't help but feel tense seeing as he can no longer enjoy a nice bath alone. The next day, Hiraku sees that more mushrooms have grown on some of the wood he had left out. But before he can make plans to eat them tonight, he sees that 5 more elves are seeking refuge in his village. Introduced as Lafa, Lhasa, Lalasha, Lalu, and Lami, Hiraku says he is happy to take them in, but they'll need to build a new home for the girls to live in. Ria takes charge and cries that they'll all finally be able to repopulate with Hiraku's help. But off to the side, we see Kuro commend Hiraku for attracting so many women. Kuro says he had always been a lone wolf who roamed the nearby forest, but when he met Yuki, he instantly fell in love with her. On one fateful day, Kuro and Yuki were attacked by a grappler bear, the king of the forest that brought both Kuro and Yuki to the brink of death, but strangely the bear chose to spare the duo. It was then when Kuro and Yuki sought out Hiraku's help for a place to stay and give birth. And even though Hiraku wielded the almighty farming tool that could slay anything, Hiraku still lent a helping hand to save Kuro and Yuki's life. Kuro says Hiraku will forever be their masters, wondering if Hiraku understands how terrifying their breed of inferno wolves can be. But none of that really matters, as Kuro says he is just blessed to have such a caring master. Cutting forward a few days, Hiraku is baffled to lay eyes on the massive mansion Ria and the elves had managed to construct, and seeing as everyone is living together, Hiraku will have the biggest room in the mansion. Heading into the main hall, Ria first shows Hiraku his portion of the house, only to move to the opposite side of the building where she shows off the kitchen and an outdoor cooking area. Underground is the cellar to store food and firewood, and on the second floor, we see Rue and Tia excited to see they have rooms of their own. Seeing an interesting room in particular, Hiraku heaves open the door, only to quickly shut it, seeing as it resembles a dungeon of sorts. Taken to the massive window overlooking the massive tree, Ria says she can change and add anything if Hiraku has any complaints, but suddenly getting an idea, Hiraku chooses to add statues of Kuro and Yuki at the entrance of their home. After some field work, Hiraku gets set up with the ingredients to make curry, a food item that intrigues Tia and Rue. Taking the girls outside, they're surprised to see so many plants they've never seen before, but Hiraku says most of the plants have been preserved thanks to his almighty tool. Heading over to the cumin plants, Hiraku grabs a handful of dried out seeds. Next up is turmeric, where the girls help dry out. Before they leave, Hiraku stocks up on coriander seeds, cilantro leaves, black peppers, and cayenne peppers, but strangely the coriander seems to scare off Yuki and Kuro, a plant Rue says needs to be studied. Back at home, Hiraku sees that Ria is his only helper, starting off by frying some rabbit meat. Whilst Hiraku grinds up the seasoning, he instructs Ria to remove the meat once they've turned golden brown, only to place the cumin into the juices left behind by the meat. Immediately the duo are struck by a sweet aromatic scent, and upon adding the vegetables to saute in the juices, we see the aromas attracting everyone. Finally dumping in the spices and the meat back in, Hiraku leaves the curry concoction to simmer, but suddenly he realizes he forgot to make naan bread. Seeing as rice could be their backup plan, Hiraku and Ria rush to gather some dough, only for Hiraku to begin cooking them by sticking them onto a hot pan to puff up. As the sun begins to set, we see Hiraku serving everyone some naan with their curry, and with Hiraku instructing everyone to scoop up the curry with the naan, the girls instantly fall in love with the rich flavors from such a meal. Seeing the girls all gathered for seconds, Hiraku celebrates a successful dinner, and with winter already rearing its head, we see Hiraku hard at work stocking up for the storm ahead of them. This time, Hiraku remembers to hand Zabuton some potatoes before she goes into hibernation during the winter, happy to exchange the food for some extra blankets. Passing by Ria, Hiraku sees that she is still working on expanding her blacksmithing forge. As for Rue and Tia, they're focused on drying out the meat to preserve and eat over winter. Hiraku proudly shows off his snow storage, containers that store any leftover vegetables, and by covering them with sheets and allowing snow to form over them, the vegetables will be able to be frozen and preserved over winter. Seeing Rue brandishing her magic, Hiraku tries conjuring a spell of his own, but nothing happens. That night, Hirako hears that low-tier ignition spells will be his best bet at learning magic, but he'll still need to study magic to pull it off. Rue points out how amazing Tia is for being able to create and control multiple golems at once. And before Hirako can praise the other girls for being so talented compared to himself, Rue declares that Hirako is the most impressive of them all. With winter arriving and snow plaguing their land, we follow Hirako carving some board games in the form of reversi, chess, and mahjong for the gang to indulge in. With Hirako teaching the girls the rules for reversi, Rue immediately challenges Tia to a game, but within a few moments Tia easily begins to dominate Rue. When Rue tries flipping the board to restart their game, Tia employs some magic to revert her foul play, and when Hirako checks on the others, he sees everyone deeply focused on their matches. When Rue tries challenging Kuro, she is instantly defeated by the genius dog. Sitting down for a game of mahjong, Hirako tries avenging Rue's honor, but sadly Kuro and the girls wipe the floor with him, leading Hirako to create a bowling game to get the gang more active. With the gang spending all of their time indoors playing games and sharing meals together, winter flies by quickly, and with spring arriving, Hirako rushes to greet the warm sun. Hirako says they need to continue planting their crops to revitalize their farm, but out of nowhere Hirako detects a monster flying towards their home, a creature the girls recognize to be a wyvern. With a massive howl, the wyvern ruptures the air currents in the skies, and when it begins charging up a fireball, Rue and Tia are forced to erect defense spells to halt the projectile. With Ria and the elves rushing to help stoke out any flames caused by the impact, we see Hirako racking his brain for a way to slay the beast before him. And as he thinks deeply, we see his almighty farming tool morph into a glowing spear. Without hesitating, Hirako launches the spear towards the wyvern, all watching as the wyvern projects several barriers to slow down the projectile. But monstrously, the spear pierces the barriers and clips one of the wyvern's wings. Calling back his spear, Hirako heaves it once again at the wyvern's stomach, officially plucking the monster out of the skies. Rushing over to inspect the corpse, Hirako confirms the creature is unconscious, hearing that encountering such large creatures are actually quite rare. Hirako wonders if someone had sent the wyvern to attack them, but the girls say no one would willingly send in such a magical creature to disturb their land, prompting Hirako to declare they'll feast on the creature. Seeing as wyverns are a delicacy even amongst nobles, Hirako whips up a simple steak, some wrapped-up meatballs, and some wyvern stew, all food items that the girls thoroughly enjoy. With everyone glad that things were resolved without issue, Rue asks if Tia would be able to block Hirako's powerful spear, but Tia says she would stand no chance against such a weapon. The girls are glad that Hirako isn't a bad person, but as we cut to the Demon Lord's castle in the Kingdom of Galgardo, we follow 3 of the 4 generals of the demon army chatting. Bizzle Chrome reveals that a wyvern was decimated by someone with only 2 attacks, news that baffles both Randon and Glatz, but Bizzle says they must remain calm and handle things. At the same time in Gatekeeper Dragons, Drime's lair, we see the blue dragon Doremu asking Gucci if he could survive Hirako's spear attack, but Gucci says there would be nothing that could defend against such an attack. The next day, we see Hirako yearn for the taste of alcohol as it would pair well with their wyvern meat. And with the girls excitedly plucking some grapes to make wine, we see them instructed to stomp and squash the grapes. Hirako says he'll be catching the juices in barrels, prompting the girls to begin their march. But as they begin circling around each other, Tia accidentally slips and falls. With the girls remembering one of the songs they used to sing in their village, they all begin singing and dancing to the beat of the song, allowing everyone to sync up with each other's movements. As Rue forces Hirako to join on the fun, we cut to later that evening where the gang have collected 16 barrels full of wine, exciting the girls as the wine needs to ferment before they can indulge in it. Zooming out, we see God being scolded by the goddess of creation for giving a human such a powerful spear comparable to the holy lance of Grime. The goddess of creation says thanks to Hirako's perfect body that God gave him, he can infinitely use such an overpowered weapon. And to top things off, the goddess of agriculture says the statue Hirako carved for her is of an old man, revealing to us that God is actually her father. Strangely, the next day, we see Hirako once again alerted to an intruder in the forest, only to stumble onto Flora, Rue's younger sister. Immediately, tension is high since Tia is already threatening to snuff out Flora, but Hiraka says Flora is free to stay with them, hearing that Flora was only visiting to check in on Rue. When Flora wonders if such a weak man is worthy of wedding her sister, Rue utters that Hiraku is actually the master of multiple inferno wolves and even took down a wyvern himself. Hiraku is surprised himself that Kuro and the other wolves are actually powerful creatures. But to make up for Kuro attacking Flora earlier, Hiraku serves Flora a hearty meal. Flora is enthralled by the plump tofu, intrigued to hear that food items like cheese and wine can be fermented for a more rich taste. As Flora wraps up her stay with the gang, she says she'll spread what she learned to others at home. But not even a month later, Flora returns with several maids. And the head maid personally introduces herself, only to show off some cows that can help with milk and cheese production. But off to the side, Tia realizes that the village is filled with vampires, elves, wolves, and spiders, but none of her own kind. Rushing off to recruit people, Tia shows off her underlings, Gran Maria, Kyurel, and Corone the Angels. As for Daga the Lizardman, he presents Hiraku with a chicken to lay eggs. Straight away, Hiraka sees that and her maids are hardworking. Plus, they seem to hail from the race of ogres. Hiraku feels bad seeing and her maids dining on simple potatoes. But when he tries teaching them the beauty of cooking, he realizes the maids will need more practice with the meals they cook. As for the three angels Tia had brought, they had been given the responsibility of patrolling the premises as a line of defense. And finally, for Daga and his lizardman, they were all tasked with helping with construction. Not too long after, Ria had shown off the other elves seeking refuge, and seeing as their village has grown drastically, Hiraku had asked for a representative of each race to gather for him. Hiraku says he would like to come up with a name for the village, and seeing as he doesn't want to use his name nor name it after the Forest of Death, Hiraku settles on calling it the Great Tree Village after the massive tree pillar their village was built around. At night, Hiraku holds a party to commemorate the naming of their village, only to be deemed mayor by his villagers. Gladly accepting the role, we see the village party throughout the night with some of the wine they fermented, all whilst Hiraku takes in the moment, grateful to be able to share the spoils of his new life with others.